is Dwayne Strawbridge, and we're here to talk about authorizations and appropriations. In other words, how does Congress pay our bills? To begin with, there are different committees in Congress. One of them is authorizations. So authorizations, to give you a quick definition, is a committee that authorizes legislation for appropriation of funds to implement laws that create agencies, programs, or government functions. In other words, it is a committee who says we want to create a program or a project. It will give variations as to the scope of the work, how the intent of the work, what the program or project will do. This is what the authorization committee is deciding. They're going to bound the work for the whatever project that they are authorizing. Now, stipulation, it does not give permission to cut a check or enter into a contract. Basically, since it's bounding the work that's going to be done, they are deciding that you can go so far with the work. In other words, it may be a study to determine something, but it may be the final output or the final product of the project or the program may be simply a report. It may not be an authorization to go and then do something. They may be just looking for a report to say this would be a recommendation. And it sets the parameters for government agency programs. It basically tells whoever's running the project, you can go this far with the work that we have authorized for you to do. Now, that is one committee. There is another committee. The other committee is called Appropriations. Now, what does the Appropriation Committee do? The Appropriation Committee, by definition, confers the budget authority on the federal agencies. In other words, they are now authorizing you, whatever funding they're going to do, to spend funds and sign contracts. Basically what that is saying is, you've had an authorizing committee say you can start a project and here's the bounds of the project, but the authorization committee does not grant you funding to do the project. In order to get the funding to do the project, you have to go to the appropriation committee and get the appropriation committee to agree to fund that project. All right? And that's basically what we're saying right here. An authorizing committee passes legislation that authorizes the establishment of some program, sets the limitations on what the program can and cannot do. Once again, as an example, they may authorize that you can get the output or the product of the project may be a report that gives recommendations, but it does not authorize the work to proceed any further than the recommendation. Now, however, after being authorized by the authorization committee, funds are then appropriated. In other words, now you're going to get the money so you can now go and do the program or the project so you can get the report. All right, so there's funds are then appropriated by the Appropriations Committee to pay for the authorized program. This is typically the way it works in Congress. You have to have the authorization, which sets the bounds, describes the program, explains what you're supposed to do with the program. And then the Appropriations Committee comes in afterwards and dictates how much money you have to get the program done. All right, so what can happen? Programs are authorized, but then have no appropriations. This is what typically, believe it or not, this happens a little bit more often than you would probably believe. You will often see this from Congress. You'll have a particular congressman or senator say that they have voted for a program, but then they never agreed to pay for the program. So typically what is happening here is the authorization committee has authorized the program to start. They've bounded it, they've described it, they said this is what we want you to go do. But then it goes to the appropriation committee and it never gets funded. So some congressman or senator can then report back truthfully that he has or she has approved or authorized a program to begin. But in the same vein, since it was no money was ever appropriated for the authorization, the program never gets off the ground. This happens a little bit more often than a lot of people think. Conversely, you can have a program that gets appropriated but never authorized. This one's seems like a little bit backwards, but believe it or not, it does happen. The Appropriation Committee can appropriate money. We're going to give $50 million for this program. Great. I've reserved $50 million for a program, but I've never authorized the program. I've never bounded the program. I've never said what the program is supposed to do with that $50 million. Since you've never got an authorization, even though you've been appropriated money, but you never got the authorization to what to do with that money, once again, money gets set aside, but since it was never authorized, the program can never begin. And like I said, this happens a little bit more often than you would think. Also, this is another thing that can happen with authorizations and appropriations, and believe it or not, this one happens also. A program can be authorized by a committee to study some topic. We're going to go off and do a research study. We're going to go look at biofuels, if you will. That's really big and popular right now in the public domain. So we've authorized $2 million to go off and study some biofuels. Great. However, the Appropriations Committee, in a cost-cutting move, very, very common in today's society and with the current economic situation, only appropriates about $1.3 million for the study. Okay? So, you're short $700K for a planned budget of $2 million to complete a study. So, you have authorization, you have appropriations. What you don't have is the total funding to complete the project. So you got like $1.3 million. So guess what? You're going to go ahead and start the program. If you're a program manager, yay, I got something. So let me go and do what I can for $1.3 million. And we'll try and get more money next year so we can finish the project. So now what's happened is you've got about 60% of your funding, and you've gone off, and for the past year you've done a study on biofuels. All right, the program, when you come up the next year, the program is reviewed as an underperforming program. In other words, you were authorized and you were appropriated money. Now it doesn't really matter, believe it or not, when Congress looks at it, they look at it as an underperforming program because it doesn't matter to them that they didn't really fund it to what you had requested. They gave you some money. They expected a result. And just because they didn't give you all the money you needed to get the expected result doesn't mean that you are not going to be criticized for not delivering on what was promised. You can solicit for more funds from the authorizing committee to complete the original intended study. That is true. But it can also be marked as an over-budget program because you're asking for more money than was originally authorized. You were authorized for $2 million. You were appropriated 1.3, but you're going to the authorizing committee saying, wait, I need a little bit more money so I can finish my study. And they're like, but we gave you $2 million. Well, they didn't really give you. They authorized you to use $2 million. Appropriations only gave you 1.3. And so you couldn't complete the full study because you didn't have all the money. But that's what they're going to look at. They're going to think you're over budget because you're asking for more than your $2 million. As an over budget program, when you go to the Appropriations Committee, because now you're going to go to the Appropriations and say, look, I need more money to finish the study. But you don't need just $700K because of time and because of you had less money, you've now got to do some other things to actually get it sort of back in bounds. You don't need just $700K, you need $1 million. All right, so it was originally a $2 million program. You need an additional $1 million to try and get to the original end of the study. Now what's really happened is you are a 50% overrun off the original budget. So what are they going to do? Well, you've already overshot that budget by 50%, so we ought to just either kill the program or, you know what, we can't give you another $1 million, we'll only give you $500K, maybe. So once that happens, you know, the Appropriations Committee cuts funding again because your program is over budget. It happens, believe it or not. And yes, there's a lot of frustration for program managers trying to get their work done. You know, trying to do the good for the committees trying to do good for the projects, trying to do good for the programs, trying to do good for their companies, but yet this is a very, very common battle that happens in Congress. And does this really happen? You know, I'm giving like little scenarios, you know, can it really happen? Well, yes it can. Actually, there was a report put out by the CBO, Congressional Budget Office, from January 2011. It's called the Unauthorized Appropriations and Expiring Authorizations Report. You can do a quick Google search, it'll pop right up. And I just happened to pull this one, just for fun. In fiscal year 2011, grants, this actually is in the congressional budget. Grants to stop the manufacture, sale, and use of methamphetamine in hotspots. Believe it or not, that is a budget line item in the congressional budget. Authorization amount, 0. Appropriations amount, $99 million. So in other words, the Appropriations Committee appropriated $99 million to stop the manufacture, sale, and use of methamphetamines in hotspots. But the Authorization Committee authorized no money for that project. So the Appropriations Committee has approved 99, but since the program was never authorized, that 99 million in funds is going to sit on the books awaiting for authorization. Now the question is often then, well, what happens to that funding? It can't just sit on the books. Well, yes it can. It can actually sit out there for several years waiting for authorization. There is a limit, and it's kind of, the limit varies on how long it sits on the books before it can be, that $99 million can be taken and used elsewhere. Can't really delve into the details on that right now because it's very, I don't want to say inconsistent, but there's so many issues that go into that. It's often called what type of color of money is the money that is being appropriated. And that just sort of depends on how the legislative language was written. So this $99 million can eventually expire and get put back on the books for use elsewhere, but the length of time it sits on the books, that's kind of up in the air depending on what type of money that has been appropriated. But anyway, this is a real thing. It happens every year. As a quick recap, Congress makes decisions as to what will be done with taxpayer funding. That's one of the main things that they do. Authorization and appropriations committees are separate. This keeps one committee from having more power than the other. And actually, it's part of the balance of power. You have to get both committees to agree to what they're doing. That way, one committee doesn't overpower the other and take too much control. You know, you've got to get multiple people to agree this is a good thing. Conversely, though, if you don't get them all to agree, like I said, Congress can truthfully say, we have authorized this program to go forward, but since no money's been appropriated, or conversely, money can be appropriated, but never authorized for spending. Watch out for this. If the program is controversial, one committee or the other may sort of just forget to fully authorize or fully appropriate all the funding needed to get the job done. Anyway, that's pretty much it for me. Once again, I'm Dwayne Strawbridge. Thank you for watching, and hope to see you out there.